things I've been doing. So we're going to get started this morning. Last week, we started with the topic about living beyond the six. And we talked about that six being the number of man. And I'm not going to review all of that because you can just click over into the YouTube channel, Oasis Spiritual Center, and you can find that teaching, Living Beyond the Six. It has the hexagon with the six in it. You may say, what's a hexagon? It's two pyramids, one up and one down and laying on top of each other. Many of you may call it the Star of David or Solomon's Star. But listen to that teaching, particularly inside of what's going on in this world today with this pandemic. We have to now stand in our truth. We must no longer allow mankind, for if source, God has given us free will, we need to exercise it. And instead of just acquiescing to what is being pushed over on us. A lot of people have been caught off guard with this, but I say it's time for us to catch our footing and to move forward. So we moved into the new spiritual year, and I usually every year around Rosh Hashanah, around the Jewish New Year, and I usually go along with their calendar. And so we entered into the new spiritual year, September, October, and this new spiritual year is 2022, and we know that 2 + 0 + 2 + 2 gives us the number of 6. But Spirit dropped in on me. 0 represents a space holder that represents possibility. And so that 0 also holds the space for the other 6. So the number of man is 6. He was created on the 6th day. And then when you look in Genesis, it talks about the number of beasts. Now, a man who is led by his carnal self, a man who is fleshly ruled, is just like a beast of the field, meaning every animal maximizes itself by living inside of its instincts, by living inside of its design, maximizing it, and then in order that they may survive. So man has is a mental being, emotional being, physical being, and that's the 3 sixes. A mental is a 6 of man, the mentalness of man, the emotionalness of man, the physicalness of man. So those are 3 6. That's really the number of the beast. When you have maximized your capacity as a human being. Now, the word tells us that there appears to be a way that's right unto man, but that is destruction. If you're living inside of it, you're just maximizing those 3 aspects of who you are going to come up short. You're not maximized because there's an invisible part of man that needs to be maximized, and that's the spirit. So man is a mental. He has a mental dimension, an emotional dimension, a physical dimension, and lastly, he has the 4th 6 is the spiritual dimension, the hidden dimension. Our goal is not to just operate inside of the spirit dimension, because if you're operating totally inside of the spirit dimension, you're not affecting anything. You have to take the spirit and superimpose it on all areas of your life, or intertwine it with, bring it all into the one. So when we talk about man's number being 6, but behind that 6 is 4 dimensions. The 6 of the mental aspect of man, the emotional aspect of man, the physical aspect of man, and lastly, most importantly, because this is this makes us so God, our spirit. So we're looking at the 4 sixes throughout this year. We're looking at when I say the 4 sixes, I'm talking about the divine spiritual man, the divine spiritual person, like the Asar, the Aset, the divine man, the divine woman, Asar, Osiris, or Aset, Isis, but it's the divine spiritual principle, female principle, and the divine masculine principle. So I want all of us to move into that next level of divinity in 2022. Are you tracking with me? All right. If you're on with me this morning and you want to move to the next level of, okay, let's do this. Everybody type in a number. If on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a peak performance, you can't do anything better than that. Put 10 in. If you're a 5, put a 5 in. If you're a 3, put a 3 in. No judgments this morning. It's a self-assessment. That's right. Thank you, Cheryl, for dropping that in there. If you're in the Zoom room, you could drop it in the chat. If you're on the YouTube live, you could type it in, type your number in. Go ahead. Let's be participatory on this morning. All right. I love it when we set a baseline. And that's important because I want you at certain times of the year or as you go through the months ahead to really ask yourself, okay, I started feeling that I was at a 5 or a 6, and now I'm at an 8. Or my goal is to get you as close as possible to the 10. Come on now, because I want us to begin to operate as the beings we were created to operate as. Now, here is the scripture I want to start with this morning. The scripture is found in Romans chapter 8, verse 19-23. Romans chapter 8, verses 19-23. Give those of you a chance who have your Bibles to open and track with me. This is Oasis Spiritual Center for Divine Living. And so we are all about teaching you, giving you the practices, the principles that will empower you to live a divine life. Now, in Romans chapter 8, and I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version, it says, "For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, that is the man, the beastly man, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now. Nature is wanting to birth a new class of being, or an old class, remembering, putting back together all the essential pieces that we can rise and truly be the gods in the earth. And it goes on and it says, and not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, grown inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. Now, let me read that in the, I want to read it in the NIV version. Let me find that in the NIV version this morning. I want to read that same set of scriptures this morning, and that's Romans chapter 8, 19-23. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God, for the divine spiritual beings to be revealed. All creation, nature, is waiting us. Why is all creation waiting us? Because the scripture says man is created a little lower than the angels. Man has been given, or the divine spirit being has been given the dominion over the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air, every creeping thing that creeps upon the face of the earth, given dominion over it because source God has outsourced, stepped out of the invisible and deposited itself inside of the visible, which is you and I, that it can experience what is created and that it can take creation to another level. Now, it goes on and says, for the creation was subject to frustration, not by its own choice. God created a perfect world, a perfect environment, but it has been subjected to the beast mentality of man who is not inspired by the fourth dimension. It goes on, it says, not by his own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it. The will of the one who subjected it. Know this, that we are all created in the image after the likeness of God, and that it rains on the good as well as the bad. We have to understand this, that all mankind has the capacity, has the potential to impact not only their worlds, but the world at large. So we have to understand we are creative beings, all of us, those who operate as sons and daughters, and those who are walking in the darkness on the lowest vibration of who they could be. They too have the ability to project out onto creation. Now, it goes on and he says, we know that the entire creation, the whole creation has been groaning like a woman in labor, as in the pains of childbirth, right up to this present time. Not only so, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoptions to sonship, the redemption of our bodies. Now, the redemption of our bodies being that now we're no longer body ruled, but our bodies are redeemed by our spirit essence. So we have to first see ourselves as spirit beings. Man is a spirit that lives in a body, and he possesses a soul. Come on now, man is a spirit that lives in a body and possesses a soul. Human beings are spirit beings that live in a body and possess a soul. Now, I hope you guys are getting that. So where am I going with that this morning? Here's where I'm going with it. We have descended. We have fallen from the place that we were designed to occupy. We have descended from being spiritual beings to being intellectual beings. We have descended from being spiritual beings to being emotional beings. Many people are emotional wrecks. We have descended to being just purely physical beings. But in order to rise and be what we were designed to be, to operate inside of our peak performance, we must turn the dial up. We must stand in the space, occupying it as sons and daughters. No longer are we children tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine. No longer are we children that, as when we were children, we spake as children, we operate as children. But when we mature, when we move into the space of adulthood, now we stand in our truth. Now we enter the arena as gladiators. Now we enter in as conquerors. Now we enter in as conscious. So not just consciously being aware of possibility, but conscious taking it to application. That's what Earth School is all about. That's when you have experiences that you can exercise. Yes, exercise your spiritual muscle. When you're sick and you feel like you can't get well, you exercise the prayer of faith for total healing. And if you are not at that level yet, the scripture tells us, if there's any sick amongst us, run to the medical profession. No, it says run to the elders, those who should be mature spiritual practitioners. They're not come with age, but it comes with experience. Come on now, because you can run to somebody that's been in this game, this religious game, for a long time, and they'll tell you that it's a personal matter, go get a shot. Or they'll tell you to take the medicine, or they'll tell you to follow after the ways of the world. But I'm here to say this morning, it's time, say it's time. It's time for those of us who identify with sons, as sons and daughters of the Creator, to actually operate as creators, as creatives, shifting our lives that are not in alignment with what we desire, realizing with our real eye that we have created the world in which we live. That's why all creation is moaning until we remember, until we recall. Now, the story about Asar, this is something you may not know. I'm gonna give you the abridged version. This is the story, a Nile Valley story about an individual called Asar. Asar had a brother named Set, and Set tricked Asar. And he tricked Asar and had Asar. One of the stories says that he challenged him to get into this box and see if he could actually get out of this box. And so when he got into this box, he sealed the box and he threw it into the Nile, and Asar was gone. And then the part of it says that he chopped up Asar into 13 pieces, and all the pieces was found. So he sent. So then what happened? I'm giving you the abridged version. Then Asar's wife, and some people say sister wife, Aset, the divine feminine principle, set out to find Asar. Aset, Isis, set out to find Asar, and she sent her cohorts to go out throughout the entire country, and they found the pieces of Asar, and they remembered them, they reattached them, but there was all the things that made up Asar. All the pieces were found except one piece, his phallic, or his male member, and so they said that a fish had actually swallow and eaten that, so they were not able to find that. But that's the most important part of the creative force, the ability to procreate, because without that instrument, the Isis, or Aset, which is, we use the word Aset, was not able to bear a child. And so here's what they say: as he lays there entombed, remember that she created a penis. When you see the Tekken, okay, the Tekken is when you go to Washington D.C. I don't know which monument it is, the tall monument, is very tall, and we call it the word eludes me now. Somebody type it in here. What do we call that thing that stands? They have some in Central Park. They have them all over the world, and these are, we call them Tekken, or we call them. Did somebody type that in? I don't know why I'm missing that this morning, but somebody help me out. What do you call that? Yeah, the Washington Monument. But what is that thing called? What is the word, that Western sign? Oh, that's right, the obelisk. Thank you for helping me there. I don't know why I couldn't. I'm really moving away from using the incorrect term, the obelisk. The obelisk represents the penis of Asar, okay? The life-giving force. Now, check this out. So why do we have all these penises all over the world? It represents Asar, that aspect of Asar that brings life. Because after she created this obelisk, that we call it, it's a Tekken, it says that she hovered over it, and he was able to impregnate herself, and that's where the sun came in, Haru. So that's the story. I'm just telling you how we have some things in this world that we don't understand. Now, I don't know why I took you to that, but it's important for you to know, when you see an obelisk, you are really looking at the male phallus of Asar. And we have to begin to understand, why is that thing so important? Okay, but that's a whole nother teaching. But where I'm going this morning is that we must finally rise to the state that we've been called to rise in as sons and daughters of God, of the Creator. That's so critical. And until you do that, you will not be operating with peak performance, maximum performance. And that's what I want you to do. So as I was cleaning up some of my books the other day, I came across a book that I purchased some time ago. And many of you all are familiar with this gentleman. And this book that I began to relook with different eyes, because I'm in a different place now. This book was actually written back in 1978. Wow. It was copyrighted in 1973. No, I'm sorry, in 2008. 2008, a year after this gentleman wrote this book. I believe it might be the same year I actually met him. And here's the book that I'm talking about: Maximizing Your Potential. by Miles Monroe. If you have the book, if you read the book, put a 1 in there. If you've read the book, have the book, or familiar with the book, put a 1 in there. If you're familiar with who Miles Monroe is, put a 0 in there. All right, so I want 1s and 0s showing up inside the chat, inside whether you're on the Zoom room or you're on the YouTube live. Go ahead, good. So, okay, now here, interesting story about, I'm gonna get to the teaching this morning. In 2008, there was a season where I was part of the Father's House. And the Father's House was a ministry that Bishop Eddie Long, if you remember Bishop Eddie Long, he had established for pastors where we could come and be poured into. And so the last year that I went to this thing was 2007, 2008, and it was a very intimate setting. Probably was about less than 100 pastors at this thing. Now, this is interesting because who was at this particular conference he had, and it wasn't a traditional conference. We weren't in this huge auditorium. We were in an intimate space. We had couches that we were sitting on. So on every, like, it was probably 2 men to a couch, or 2 people to a couch. The Father's House was made up not only of male pastors but female pastors. So I was there, and so guess who there was? T.D. Jakes was there. So that was huge to be in a very intimate space with T.D. Jakes. This gentleman by the name of Mark Hansby. He has some very metaphysical teachings. I don't even know if Mark Hansby is still alive. And then there was a couple other people, but the one that stood out for me was T.D. Jakes, Marcus Hansby, and Miles Monroe. So each of them had some time with us. So Miles Monroe had already had his, this was around the same time he was teaching on the keys of the kingdom, understanding the kingdom. And if you haven't read or listened to his series on the kingdom, well, he unpacks that thing in a very powerful, non-traditional way. So I was there in the room, and the way it was set up was when you needed to take a break, you just took a break. So I stepped into the hallway to go to the restroom, and there was vendors out there. So Miles Monroe was there vending his book. He was his newest set of books, and he asked me, he said, young man, have you, the voice he had, that British accent. He said, young man, are you aware of the kingdom? And I said, somewhat so. And then he began to talk to me about his series. And he says, I'm going to commission you right now as an ambassador for the kingdom. Now that was interesting. So that's where I get the term ambassador from. In 2008, 2007, he laid hands on me. There was nobody in the hall but he and I, which is strange. And so I had this conversation with him. He almost like knights me, and he calls me ambassador. He says, I'm going to drop on you the spirit of the ambassador. Not really clear on what that meant, but being open to it, deposited in me. And so a year I spent devouring all of his information on the kingdom. And that's when I had changed the name of the ministry to Dominion. And, so the ministry has evolved. My ministry, I started off at Exodus Ministry. That's when I was started my ministry back in 92, when I started the ministry in 92. And then it went to Covenant of Peace Ministries when I merged 2 churches. And then after Covenant of Peace, it became Dominion Ministry. And then after Dominion Ministry, it became Catalyst Church. And then finally it became where we are. We evolved to where we are today, the Oasis Spiritual Center for Divine Living. Now, so I say this to say, because I'm going to teach from this book. This book is entitled Maximizing Your Potential. Now, one more thing before we move into today's teaching. Last week I went home to preach for a pastor friend of mine who is a Nigerian, who is married to someone I've known since childhood. And so I went to preach at their church. Now, they have a church that's under the label of a Mennonite church, but they clearly don't operate inside the boundaries of the Mennonite doctrine. The one thing that I'm very familiar with is the doctrine of the different churches or the different denominations. Part of that came about being a therapist. Particularly, I operated as a Christian counselor for a minute, and so I had to meet my clients where they were, and so that meant some were Protestant, they all were either Protestant or Catholic, and sometimes I had individuals show up who were of other faiths, and as a last resort, they were looking at somebody who can help them with their spiritual matters. Well, I was there on this past Sunday, and the area that I was in used to be an area that had the CHA, Chicago Housing Authority, had high rises there, but they've torn down the high rises. They've built this really nice facility, but their church is still there. And they were saying that after I preached, they asked me if I would walk the land that was around their church. It's like 22 acres that they're petitioning the city to give to them because is not being developed. And so they spent like $30,000 on plans, which is wonderful because the word of God says, write the vision and make it plain, that he who reads it can run with it. So those who they want to invest in it, they need to be able to see something tangible. See, what you see, what I see, they can't see. That's why when we have a download, we have to find a way to make it plain and to present it that others, because people are visual people. They are held hostage to the sensory realm. And until they can walk in the spirit, you got to meet them where they are. So long story short, we walked the land and we were standing there talking. And they were asking me what I was doing. And I said that, I'm a spiritual leader for Oasis Spiritual Center. And they said, what did you say? And I said, spiritual leader for Oasis Spiritual Center. And they said, the name of this area we've called it the Oasis. And there was something else they attached to it. And I said, look at God. I have this relationship with them. And it's just amazing how sometimes you get something from source, from God, that is bigger than you, but you only see a corner of it. But then as time elapses and you stand back and look back, you can see how big things are, how vast things are. So I want you to consider in 2022, taking on your life, moving beyond just being a mental person, maximizing your mental aspect, moving beyond being an emotional wreck or an emotional being, but maximizing your emotional self, using your emotional energy in the way that it was created to be used. I want you to consider moving beyond, but I want you to maximize your physical self. So I want us to take on making sure that we eat, that we sleep, that we do those things that represents our highest and greatest goods when it comes to our physical bodies. So we got to take inventory of all those areas of our lives. But we also have to resuscitate. We have to remember. We must recall that we are spirit beings first, not any of those other three. Man is a spirit, male, female. You're a spirit. You become the Asarian man, if you're a man listening, or the Aset woman. That is the woman that has arisen to her full capacity, maximizing who she is based on not her physicalness, not her mentalness, not her emotionalness, and the same for the man, but realizing that they are a God class being. So the Egyptians or the Nile Valley civilizations didn't use the word God. The word God is a very German term. They use the word neteru, and even the scripture says all creation and nature is God's sources. Ultimate creation awaits you and I. So we want to begin to explore. So I'm going to spend the next few weeks dealing with maximizing your potential. The keys to not dying, or the keys to dying empty. Too many of us are dying or even alive, but walking as dead men. So this morning, I want to take a moment and just deal with why we should maximize. So in his book, Good. How you guys doing out there? Are you tracking with me? Are you feeling me? Is this something that's relevant to where you are? I think this book is going to be a catalyst because sometimes a thing can be written before it's time. Okay. Who can see your message? Is that a question somebody asking? I'm not sure if that, but it's showing up. Who can see my message? Okay, the recording is on. Only you and those who are in the chat with you can save your direct message. Okay, so that's just a little note to me this morning. I'm operating without a backroom person for right now, but a lot of that is, I don't expect people who are professionals to do things for free. And if I cannot compensate, then I'll do without, or I'll do the best I can with what I have. And with the responsibilities I've taken on, I didn't have the cash stream. I had to reallocate my cash stream to those things that I needed to allocate them to. So that's going to come. So we'll have a backroom editor, someone who's a professional. I know people, so we may say, well, I can do it for you. Unless it's what you do, then I'm going to say I'm waiting on that person to show up that this is their area of expertise, that they can move us to the next level. All right. And I'm waiting for those who I believe with everybody I need for the team are going to come on board, and it won't be about getting paid. We're going to identify musicians, anything I need in order for this ministry to pop off in a more powerful, maximized way is going to be available to me. Now, when we get to the place where compensation can be rendered, I am the first person that believes a laborer is worthy of his hire. Now, let's move into today's message. That was a long lead in. The maximum of mediocrity. That's what he's talking about here. He says, what does it mean to maximize? What is maximum? The word maximum may be defined as supreme, greatest, highest, and ultimate. It is synonymous with such concepts as pinnacle, preeminence, culmination, the apex, the peak, and the summit. Takes us back to the obelisk, or takes us back to the Tenek. So we see that the supreme, the highest, it implies the highest degree possible. Just a brief look at these concepts immediately convicts us of the many opportunities we have abused and forfeited because we have failed or have refused to give our all. That's what I want to ask you this morning. Are you giving your all for you? Come on, maximize the things that pertains to you. So as I'm shadowing this particular individual who has been at this company for over 28 years. He's an attorney, but he works here, and he handles it's interesting. I'm on the irregular sort, because I'm dealing with irregular people. I'm not talking to regular people. I'm talking about irregular people. The irregular sort is for heavy iron, heavy things. So I'm dealing with irregular, heavy people. Irregular means that you're authentic. You don't fit the mold. You're right where you need to be. And many of us are feeling as though we are not good enough because we don't fit molds. But you are created to be who you have been. You must step inside of, I am good enough. I'm perfect. I'm whole. I'm complete. I don't have to compete with what others want me to do. Now, he goes on, he says, this failure, to give our all, or to do our best to go beyond the expectations of others, to express ourselves fully, to live up to true potential, to extend ourselves to the limit of our abilities, to give it all we have, to satisfy our own convictions, is called mediocrity. When you are descending to fulfilling what others think you should be feeling, you descend to mediocrity. When you are trying to fit in, you are being mediocre. Simply put, mediocrity is living below our known true potential. Living beyond our known potential. Because guess what? Your ability is your known potential. Your talent that you have, what you have right now, is your potential for right now. But if you exercise what you have right now, it will grow. Simply put, mediocrity is living below our known true potential. It is accepting the norm, pleasing the status quo, doing what we can get by with. That's what I see happening. That's what I see happening. I'm appalled. I am appalled at ministers, those who are spiritual leaders, who are not standing in the truth that they have been preaching. We have acquiesced. We have delegated the power, the authority that we have to the world system. The word says we are called to be in the world, but not of the world. Come on now. It's time for those who have been tried to be tried again by fire. The best thing you can do is know what you are called to do, stand inside of it, stand in your truth. Your truth will not be the truth of the world. But many of us are so people-pleasing that we are unwilling to take a stand for what you believe. And then sometimes you have to be at the place where you can contend what you believe. You can explain what you can believe. That's why I said we're spiritual scientists, because it's not just say, I believe because I believe, as that settles it, but this is why I believe through this experience I had. When I was sick, I prayed the prayer of faith and I was made well. When I was running short on something, when I was in lack, I moved into abundance by doing certain things. So we got to stand, we got to maximize. Therefore, to maximize is to express, expose, experience, and execute all the hidden. To express, come on now, to experience, to expose, and execute all the hidden God-given abilities, talents, gifts, and potentials through God's vision, okay, breathed in our souls to fulfill his purpose for our lives on earth. Now, when God breathed into us, we became a living soul. That is, when God breathed into us, he stepped out of infinity and stepped into humanity. So he's inside you. Greater is he that is in you than the he that, no, let me rephrase that. Greater is it that is in you than the it that's in the world. What is the it that's in the world? Your physical body. Okay, that's why it says to be carnally minded, to be physically minded. To be carnal means senses. So the senses are five, and the five senses are that which is the program for the physical self. If you're living limited to your physical self, it's death. What it means, death. It doesn't mean you're dying right now. It means that there's a part of you that is inactive, and we got to activate it. Awesome. Cheryl says, I and source are one. Come on, I am source. I am a manifestation of source. Now, let's look at mediocrity. Mediocrity is living below our known potential. So if you did not put 10, you are still inside of a level of mediocrity. This is not judgments, but this is what I want you to get to, where we can rise to our full estate, what we've been called to be as sons and daughters of God, as God incarnate in the world, as super beings, as meta humans, as Deepak Chopra would call us. But we are more than even meta humans. We are divine spiritual beings. He says, where I'm at with time. So let me go to here. Okay. Let's look at some of the, we're going to come back to this next week. But I want to look at, first look at some of the principles. The principle of capacity, we want to explore that. We want to explore the principle of comparison. We want to explore the principle of experience. We want to explore the being dissatisfied with a fraction of who you are. So I want to talk about the curse of comparison, because we compare ourselves to the world, because we see something other than we are, and we try to measure up to that. So I want to talk about the curse of comparison for today. Okay. A few years ago, I was invited to speak at a series of seminars in Germany for a period of 3 months, says he. miles. I live with a wonderful family who hosted my wife and I. During the time, I was able to experience the rich heritage and culture of Deutschland. Among the many wonderful memories I still carry is a lesson I learned about the principle of maximization. It occurred during my first personal experience with Germany's world famous Autobahn Expressway. The Autobahn is a network of roads with speed restrictions, without speed restrictions, that crisscross Germany and many other neighboring countries. One day, as we were traveling from a city in northern Germany to the south, on that. Oh, I don't know why this thing is talking to me here. I'm not asking it to do anything. That's so much for technology. So he goes on, and he was saying that they were on the Autobahn. One day, as they were traveling from the city in North Germany to the south, the host asked if I would like to experience driving without a speed limit. This felt like a dream come true. So after filling up with petrol, I took the driver's seat and entered the Autobahn. Now, this is interesting. At first, I was excited, thrilled, and anxious as I felt the adrenaline rush through my entire body. The feeling of having the responsibility for power without externally imposed limits also brought another mixed set of emotions, including temporary confusion. When you understand how powerful you are and you take on the power, then you operate in a whole nother domain or dimension, and you begin to operate, or you'll feel the difference. And he's experiencing this right here. He says, all I had learned from my past concerning speed limits, fear of violations, restrictions imposed by the law, as I knew it began to wrestle with my newly found freedom. In essence, the possibility of using maximum power was challenged by my learned knowledge of limitation. Even when it comes to standing in, I don't get sick. Though so many of the human condition, those inside the human condition get sick. And when you stand and say your truth, you don't get sick, it's a challenge. You've exposed yourself, and because they're living in mediocrity, they're going to attack you. Who do you think you are? When you look at the story of the man Jesus, what gave him the audacity to tell them, religious folks, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father? Oh, that just caused people to snap off, because wait a minute, you're saying that you and God are one. Yes, and people will say the same thing to you. Wait, when you say you are God, what do you mean by you are God? Because they don't want, they can't wrap their minds around the concept of a God class of being. He says, I was trapped by the condition of my past. And many of us are trapped by the human condition of my past, and I was handicapped by the fear of unlimited possibilities. Some of you are handicapped by the fear of how great you are, how great you could be. Sometimes you just want to fit in. Sometimes I've been in situations where there was a child in a group of children who was head and shoulders above them, but fear of the attack would make them slink or slumber back into where they are. So it's like smart kids oftentimes will begin to act out because they don't want to be acknowledged as the smartest kid in class. So this is interesting. He says, I was trapped in the condition of my past, handicapped by the fear of unlimited possibilities. As the pressure of my foot accelerated the engine, I glanced down at the speedometer and noted that it was registering 80 miles per hour. Being an experienced driver for more than 25 years, I must confess that I had previously driven over 80 miles per hour and even flirted with 90 miles per hour on occasion. Now, here I was with an open invitation to maximize the ability of this car. He was driving a Mercedes. Now, I drive Mercedes. I love Mercedes. Some people like Audi. Some people like Volvo. Some people like Chevrolets. Some people like Mini Coopers, or whatever you like. That's cool. But the one thing about my Mercedes, it goes up to like 180 miles per hour. I've never pushed it beyond 92. Because the car floats, and just, I can't wrap my mind around that this thing can go 180 miles per hour. Now, you got to be careful when you're going that fast. There's a lot of conditions you got to be cognizant of. Now, look what he says. Now, here I was with an open invitation to maximize the ability of the car. As other cars raced past me with the ease of low-flying jets, I watched as my speed gauge tilted past 80. My host smiled and asked, "What are you afraid of?" And I'm asking some of you all this year, as we move into 2022, what are you afraid of? Okay, we're still standing. Not wanting to feel intimidated by this opportunity, I further depressed the pedal and I felt the thrill of the car traveling at 115 miles per hour. Words cannot describe the awesome power and pride I felt controlling the speed and the direction of such ability. I was beginning to feel proud of myself as we raced through the mountains and lush green foliage of the Black Forest. I was on top of the world. Who could catch me now? I had arrived. I was a king of the road, master of the highway. This feeling of supremacy was further enhanced by every time I passed another vehicle. In fact, I heard myself saying every time we pass another car, why don't they pull over, park, and let the real drivers through? There I was. I had achieved the ultimate. I had set a record for myself. I had passed everyone else. I was the best. Suddenly, after approximately 20 minutes of driving, a Mercedes-Benz cruised past me at 150 miles per hour, seemingly coming out of nowhere. Instantly, I felt like I was standing still. My host turned to me and he said, and he chuckled, "So you see, you are not traveling as fast as you can, but only as fast as you will." As these words lodged in my mind, I quickly began to understand the curse of comparison and the limitations of self-pride. From this experience, I learned 3 lessons. He learned the principle of capacity. Okay, and we're going to look at those next week. He learned the principle of comparison. And lastly, he learned the principle of experience. But I want to close with this from that wonderful story. He said that, you see, you are not traveling as fast as you can, but only as fast as you will. You're not maximizing life, but you're minimizing your life as you will. So we wanted you to know that the most powerful thing that you have is 2 words, 2 sets of words. I am and I will. I am and I will. Those are 2 powerful axioms that you must learn to maximize. I am and I will. Courtney says, I'm not doing as much as I can. I am doing as much as I will. Love it. Most of us are not doing as much as we can. We're only doing as much as we will. Remember Abraham? He wasn't doing as much as he can. And then God showed up and said to him, didn't I tell you to get away from the place of familiarity? Sometimes you got to move from that which you are familiar with to expand, to release. Sometimes you got to go to the land of giants to grow from the mental midgetry you've been involved in. I'm excited. Why am I excited? Because I was born for a time such as this. For 20 years, for 30 years inside of ministry, but I didn't feel that I was connected. I didn't feel like that I was able to really be and expand and deliver what I had to deliver, because I was inside of the religious system. I was inside of what people had capacity for. But now entering stage left are people who have capacity for more. If you're on this call right now, you're on the call because you have capacity to do, be, or have more. Oasis Spiritual Center is about expansion. It's about moving from just enough to more than enough. It's about moving from mediocrity to maximization. I thank you for for tuning in this morning. I hope something has been said that's been uplifting and encouraging. Now, here's a challenge I want to make. It has been dropped in my spirit with a urgency that I haven't had in a long time. I thought I was through with ministry from the perspective of a boots on ground ministry, but I have been given a mandate to drop a boots on ground ministry right here in St. Louis. I didn't come here for a job. I didn't come here for a relationship. I came here on assignment, and Source knows how to get you from point A to point B. Source knows how to allow the perfect storm to come through your life to cause you to go where you need to go. Remember who didn't want to go a certain place he was called to go to? He didn't want to go to Nineveh, but a perfect storm arose and he was thrown overboard and he was swallowed by it. Metaphorically, he was swallowed by the whale. The whale saved his life. He came to the realization that he had capacity. He had an assignment. You have an assignment. And you cannot fulfill this assignment inside of mediocrity. You cannot feel your assignment inside of being a human being. You cannot feel your assignment comparing yourself to others. You cannot fulfill your assignment if you're not willing to be tried by fire, if you're not willing to go through the experience. Now, I want you to consider hooking up with me. We have a virtual audience. And many times, because we have a virtual audience, people think that there's no needs. But there are needs. God is not going to drop what I need out of heaven. It comes through the hands of people. I want you to consider becoming a partner with me from the next year. Why do I want you to be a partner with me? Because as I drop the ministry inside of St. Louis, I don't want those who are coming to me to hear the old message about money. I want them to come to the place of possibility and see possibility, to see something, nothing become something. I want to teach them how to create, but I don't want to have the money conversation with them in an immature at the wrong time, because many individuals have left the encampment of the church because of the mismanagement, because of the exploitation of money, because ministry just became materialism, and not materialism to advance the kingdom, but materialism to advance the lifestyle of particular individuals. Now, that's not to say that we can't drive great, nice cars, live in nice homes, have great things, because if you really are operating according to spiritual practices, you should have those things. You should have everything that represents God's highest and greatest good for you. So I want you to consider becoming a partner. Now, partnership that I'm asking for right now is that you commit to sowing significant seed into this ministry. Not based on you are able to step foot inside the door, but you are going to be part of creating that space here in St. Louis. And as we expand, we will have the space in wherever you are, the space is there. If you begin to hold the high watch for the space of Oasis Spiritual Center showing up there, hold the space, sow it into another space. And as those spaces, as St. Louis comes online, St. Louis now will be part of sowing into the safe space of maybe it's the Carolinas or in Atlanta or Phoenix or even Chicago. Come on, I don't want the conversation to be money for those who I'm delivering the message of the kingdom to. Let the kingdom take care of what we need, and you're part of the kingdom. And so you can do that by going to oasisspiritualcenter.com. oasisspiritualcenter.com. That's the website. Go over to the giving tab and you can make a donation to the ministry. Now, I don't like to make strong appeals, okay? Because sometimes it comes across as just rubbing the people the wrong way. It's begging. No, it says make your request known. Come on now. If I want water, I'm going to ask for water. Now, I'm not asking for myself. I have a good government job. And now I have a good part-time job. So all of my needs are met according to the work that I put in. But there's some things that I am called to do that goes beyond what I can do with what I have. But if you want to partner with me, I make space for that. Awesome. Well, that's all I have today. I got off at 4 o'clock this morning, got into bed by 4:30, was looking forward to getting up at 8:30 so I can be on this call today. Looking forward to tomorrow's teaching. Want to find out more about the ministry, go to oasisspiritualcenter.com. Poke around, find out what we're about, and be about what we're about. Thank you for your time. Let me look here, see if there's anything here. Supreme, highest, ultimate. I am source. What am I afraid of? Dorothy, the reflection that shows up that we see has a shadow on the ground in the sun. When we see it, tells you a lot. And so many people, you realize your shadow is always bigger than you. So there's a hidden aspect of who you are. There's a waiting to come forth. Come on now. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, that's all I have. Let me drop over right quick to the YouTube channel, see what I got going on there. I see a couple comments there, but I really want this thing to begin to grow, but it won't grow except you cultivate it. Turn your community on. You know, nothing worse to be the only one in the community with the information. But when you have your community introduced to something that makes your community greater, your little tribe, your 4 or 5 people you run with, introduce them to something, get them involved. We grow, we expand. I'm not satisfied. I feel as though when I look in the natural, I see mediocrity. Because when I look in the spiritual, I see this thing bigger than what we are experiencing. And so we got to ask, what are we afraid of? Are we doing all that we can do to expand this? I know it's kind of difficult to grow something that's invisible, a virtual church, but you can grow it. Anything I send you, you can copy and you can paste it to somebody else. I purposely do it like that. I purposely send you the links that you can copy the link and send it to your girlfriend or send it to that person you met that said, hey, I'm struggling. I need a new place where I can be poured into, where I can dip my cup. Oasis Spiritual Center is that place. So I'm going to prepare to do what I need to do today and look forward to tomorrow. And we're going to start this journey. Peak performance, turn it up. Turn it up. Go look in the mirror and say, turn it up. Turn it up. Turn it up. Maximize your dial. So that's all I have this morning. We're going to close this morning with what we start with, Mind Power by James Brown.
We're dealing with,
thank you,
a very critical and crucial time. Most crucial and critical time that I've ever witnessed. Being as young as I am, you know, we all don't want to say nothing else, so we say as young as we are. I want to talk about pronunciation and realization.